Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me? All right. Awesome. It's so great to see so many of you all turn up for this class. I'm super excited about this class. So just to give you a sense of what's going to happen. So this is going to be a 2-hour class, and we're going to be going through the basics of Python. So that's going to be the focus for this weekend, this next 2 hours. And after this, next week, we're going to focus more on the data science related parts of Python. We're going to be going through packages like NumPy and Pandas. But this week, it's going to be a primer on Python. It's for absolute beginners. I'm so excited to see all of you all participate in this class. So let me just give you a quick run through as to what we are going to cover, and then we can get started. So just to give you a quick sense of who I am, my name is Giri. I go by GPal. I'm a self-taught programmer. And in March, I taught over 50 Reddit folks a 4-week Python course. And that's how I got excited about teaching. And I decided, wow, this is really meaningful. I enjoy doing this. And I enjoy learning and teaching Python. So that's what I'm doing. I've got to tell you, though, that this is the first time that I am teaching a class that's live streamed to such a large number of audience. So if there's some bumps along the way, I hope you pardon me and just give me feedback along the way, and we can improve this. The whole idea is that, over time, this is going to get better, and we can all learn and improve. So thank you for turning up. I hope that you enjoyed this session. So what's the game plan for today? We're going to be, first of all, building up an understanding of data types in Python. Think about integers, think about strings, think about floats. We're going to understand the data types so that we can build a very simple MadLib game. If you haven't heard about this, no worries. I'm going to show you how the game works, and we're going to build that game together. And we're also going to build a tip calculator just to kind of consolidate our knowledge of data types. After that, we're going to understand how we could control the flow of programs. How do we use if-else statements? How do you get a for loop? How do you construct a while loop so that we can build a very simple password verification program? And then finally, we're also going to learn how to write functions so that we can minimize code duplication. And if we have time, we're also going to learn how to use lists. But if we don't, we're going to focus on that next week. And next week, what we're going to do is that we're going to use Python to learn how to import data files for analysis. We're going to be using packages like NumPy and Pandas to complete some simple descriptive statistical analysis. So that's going to be the game plan for next week. So I want to just quickly explain the 3 principles that I've thought about in building this class. First of all, it's the principle that we learn best by practice. So I'm not going to lecture that very much. We're going to focus a lot on practice, and I hope that you code along with me, because that's the best way that we can learn. The second thing is the 80-20 principle. I think there's a lot of nuance with Python, but today my focus is really going to be on the most fundamental 20% that I think is going to give you 80% of the results. So that's going to be the focus for this session. It's really introductory, so we're just going to focus on the most important parts of Python. The third thing is that I think learning is just so much more fun when it's social, rather than you sitting in your bedroom trying to learn how to code. I think learning is just so much more meaningful, effective, and fun when we can learn from each other. And that's the kind of community that I hope to build. And I hope that you enjoy working together with all these folks all across the world learning how to code in Python. So I really hope to get that community together here. So we're going to be using two different tools for this 2-hour session. First is this website called Replid. We're going to use that very quickly, very soon. This is the place where we will code. The second tool that we're going to use is a Discord server app. It's like a group forum for those who don't know what it is. I'm going to show you how that works as well. And the thing about that is that that's the place that we're going to go to discuss questions, where you can ask questions, we can work on problems together. So that's the second tool that we're going to use. So the first tool we're going to use is Replid. So it allows you to code within the browser itself. You don't need to download anything. It allows you to share your code easily with others. So if for whatever reason you have a bug, we can debug it together. And it's free, which is awesome. And so let's go ahead and sign up and write our first line of code on Replid. So open up a new tab, go to repl.it. All right. So I have an account set up already. If you go to the top right-hand corner, you should see a sign up page. So go ahead, sign up. So go ahead and sign up. And after you sign up, just scroll down and click Python 3. You should see something like this. So just click Python 3. All right. So this is the place that we're going to be programming. So let me just show you around. Let me just show how this works. So you just enter the line of code that you want. Let's just say print. This is the classic start to programming. Hello world. Print. This is cool. Right? And suppose you want to run the program. All that you have to do is click this button, this run button. Click it, it runs. That's it. So that's how it works. And I want to teach you something here itself. So this is code that we have executed. Sometimes we want to leave comments to make sense of the code later on. So the way that you go about doing that is that you enter hash and then you write your comment. And the thing about a comment is that the comment doesn't get executed, but it helps you make sense of the code later on. Right, cool. Does anybody have any questions at this point? Is everything making sense? So I just showed you how to execute code on Replid thus far. The next thing I wanted to show you is how you go about sharing your code with others. Suppose there's a bug here and you can't make sense of it, you need help. What you do is that you click this share button and you get a link. And then what you can do is you can go to a Discord server app. There's a programming exercise section. And you can just type it out and say, hey, I've got an issue. Please help me out. Just you need to specify the error that you have, and others can come in and help you out. So that's how it works. And the thing with Replid is that they come up with a name randomly. I would never name anything yummy metallic prospect. So you could go ahead and change the name. You can just say class 01 example. So that's Replit in a nutshell. That's the place where we're going to be coding for today and for next week. There are certain limitations with Replit. For example, when it comes to visualizations, when it comes to graphics, it's not the best place. We need to use other software like Jupyter Notebooks to get around that. But we're not going to be using that, just to keep things simple. So for the time being, for this week and next week, Replit is going to be more than sufficient. All right. So that's Replit. We're going to be using it a lot more, so we'll get into that later on. So the next tool that I wanted to show you was the Discord server app. So the Discord server app is very critical for this group for two reasons. That's the place we're going to be asking questions, and second, that's the place that I'm going to be posting all the updates. It is kind of challenging to email hundreds of people. The thing is that Gmail thinks that you're a spammer if you mail a few hundred people. So this is the place that we're going to be discussing. I'm going to be posting all the updates. And for those who haven't signed up for the Discord server app, this is just a short URL for you to log in, to sign up. So that's this. So this is the link. And I wanted to just quickly show you the different sections that we have. So I'm going to be posting all the class announcements here. This is where all the class announcements are going to go. If you have any ideas you want to work on with others, this is the place that you post it. It's the Project Ideas channel. If you have any helpful resources that you have seen, and this is the place that you posted, the Helpful Resources channel. And the most important channel for today is the Programming Exercises channel. If you have any questions throughout the day about this course, this is the place that you post it. We have TAs who have volunteered to help out, and I'm going to be here as well occasionally. So this is the place that you post it. Okay, so I'm getting some feedback that the link doesn't work for some of you all. So let me just share that link again via YouTube right now. Give me a second. Give me a second. Let me type this up. GG-9. So I just posted that Discord link again for those who haven't been able to sign up for it. All right, so that's for the logistics. Does anybody have any questions about that? Otherwise, we can get straight into it. Is everything making sense? Any questions? All's good? All right, let's do it, guys. So the first thing that we're going to focus on is the topic of data types. So just think about it this way. The whole of programming is all about taking in data, processing the data, and outputting the data. It's all about data manipulation. So let me give you a simple example. Imagine you sign up for Tinder, right? You log in your name, you You specify your name, you specify your age. There's a Tinder algorithm that decides, figures out what's the right match, and then it outputs certain matches, and hopefully there's a match. It's compatible. So the whole idea here is that programming is all about data manipulation. You take in data, you process the data, then you output the data. The thing about human beings is that we are intelligent enough to understand that age is a different data type as opposed to the name of somebody. But the program isn't, but the computers aren't smart enough to figure that out. They're distinct data types that programs work with, and you need to specify the data types. Is it a string? Is it an integer? Is it a float? And so on. So I'm going to be explaining these different data types right now. So the first data type that we're going to be focusing on is called strings. And we actually kind of work with strings already. Think about this component here, this part here, hello world. That's a string. This is cool. That is a string. So let me give you examples of other strings. Examples. Anything that's within the single quotes or a double quote can be a string. Even this 87, even though it's a number, when you express it within quotation marks, it's actually a string. This is also a string. Even though it's empty, it's an empty string. So the idea is that anything that falls within a single quotes or a double quotes can be a string. And if you want to print out a string, you just say print, and then you type in whatever string that you have in mind. I am taking a class now. Let's say we want to run it. Go ahead and run it. So just go ahead, type out a few strings. Just get a hang of it. So these are strings. This is a data type. Now, it's not fun just to hard code these. So these are strings, right? So the next thing we want to focus on is how do we store these strings? So in Python, there are these things called variables for you to hold these strings. So for example, my name is gpal. So think about this string. This string is just floating around. I need to assign a variable to it so that I can use it later on. So I could create this variable called name and say that, look, this is going to be equal to this string. And now, instead of typing out the string gpal, I can just say print name, and it's going to print it out. Let me take all these things out. Take a look at that. So what's happening here is that I'm creating this variable, and I'm assigning it and pointing it to this string. Now, the thing that I want to emphasize here is that in mathematics, equal means like both sides are equal. It's like an equality operator, but that's not how to think about that. In the case of programming, equal means assignment. What I'm doing here is that I'm creating this variable called name, and I'm associating it with this string called gpal. So go ahead, create a variable, and try printing out that variable right now. All right. So in this case, what we have done so far is that we have hard-coded this variable. That's not quite fun. We want to get data from the user itself, and this is how we do it. So suppose in this case I've hard-coded it. Suppose I want to get the username, right? What I do is I enter input. That's a function. I'm going to explain what a function is later on, but let's just go with it. Function, and then you enter the question. Please enter username. Then I can print username. Okay. So let's try this out. So if you try this out, now it's asking me to enter the username. So I got to key in something here. Let's just say username. Then you find that it actually outputs that username. So now what we have done is that we are now able to take input from the user. We're not just hard coding the variables anymore. We're actually able to take in data from the user itself. So go ahead and try getting data from the user. Now, the next thing I want to show you is how do you join strings together? How do you put strings together and create something a bit more creative? So right now we just have single line strings. Why do we combine things together? The technical term is called concatenation. The idea is that you have all these strings and you want to put them together. So the question is, how do you do that? So let me show you how that's done. So suppose we take the username and then we ask the user, what's your hobby? Well, let's ask him, let's see, what's his hobby? Yeah. Input, what's your hobby? Okay. We have two variables here right now. Let me take all of these things out. We're taking the username and then we're asking what's the hobby. And suppose we want to put these things together. So what we do is that we say print, right? I want to get username. Let's see. And then enter hobby. So you just use the plus operator, and it allows you to concatenate the strings. Let me just change it to what do you like to do. Okay. Let's try this right now. Okay. Gpal. I like to code. Okay, so you see a mistake. There's a bug here, right? So you find that the username and the word just meshes together. You want some space. So what you need to do is you need to just enter the space here. All right, so let's run it again. Gpal likes to code. Now you find that you concatenate the strings. You're putting the strings together. Right, so go ahead, try to get a few pieces of data and concatenate it together. Put it together. All right, so now what we're going to do is that we're going to have our first mini coding exercise. It's called a MadLib game. I'm not too sure if people are familiar with the game. So the idea is that you get a bunch of user input. Maybe you ask the user, tell me your name, tell me a place, tell me an adjective. And then what happens is that you combine it together to create like a funny story. So imagine I ask, tell me a name. So let's say I say Jake, and then I say, look, tell me a place. Let's say I say the library, and give me an adjective. Let's say graceful. And then I mesh all these things together and come up with something funny. Maybe like, graceful Jake runs to the library. So that's the idea behind the MadLib game. So I've attached a link as well. So this is going to allow you to practice how to get input from the user and put these things together. So let me go ahead and share it with you all. Let's see. Right. So go ahead and try it out. So we're going to spend about 10 minutes or so trying it out. If you have any questions, post it on the programming exercises channel. I'm going to be there and alongside others who have volunteered to answer your questions. So go ahead, spend 10 minutes. We're going to come back at around 3:10 and I'm going to show you how I would do it. Guys, I've shared that link in the programming exercises channel as well. So give yourself about 10 minutes, give it a shot, and we'll come back. All right, we have about 5 more minutes, and then we're going to come back and then continue with integers and floats. Got 5 more. I think people are almost done. Let's just give ourselves about 3 more minutes. Try to wrap it up. I saw some very creative MadLibs. Awesome, looks good. Okay, 2 more minutes, and then let's get started. All right, 1 more minute. Just wrap it up. Lots of really great creative MadLibs, guys. Okay, just 30 seconds. Come back. Okay, awesome. So this was a basic coding challenge. I think most of you all were comfortable doing it. I want to showcase the work of Disney, the MadLib game that he came up with. I thought it was pretty creative. So let's go ahead. Let's just execute the program, and then let me explain what he or she did here. So you click run. So the program requests you to key in an adjective. Let's say I say fast. A noun which is supposed to be in plural. Let's just say let's say cats. Let's say another noun. Let's just say birds. Another adjective. Let's say it's slow. Roses are fast. Cats are blue. Birds are slow, and so are you. This is a good one. I saw many other creative ones, but in the interest of time, let's move on. But I just want to explain what happened here in the code. So what Disney did was that he or she created all these different variables, had these input statements, and then printed out line by line. There are ways to print this out in one statement and still break into a new line. We're not going to cover that because that's kind of intermediate advanced. In the interest of time, we just want to cover the basics. But thank you all for the very creative exercises. I would highly suggest that if you have time after the class, go ahead and take a look at the MadLib games that others came up with. It's pretty fun. So let's turn back into data types. So far we have covered strings, but strings aren't the only data types. There are also integers and floats. And let me explain what these two different data types are. So let me give you examples of integers. The 1 would be integer, 2 would be an integer, -2 would be integer, 0 would be an integer. Essentially, any number that you would count in ordinary life would be an integer. But floats, you can think of it as numbers with a decimal point, just to simplify it. So 4.0 would be a float. 5.0 would be a float. 4.2 would be a float. So just think of it as a decimal point. There are other related data types like a long, which is for really large numbers, but we won't use it often. So these are the two main data types that you need to be familiar with: floats and integers. Now, the thing that you need to understand is that suppose you take in a value from the user, it is going to be in the string format, and you need to reformat it. You need to cast it in an integer or a float type if you want to do math on it. So let me give you an example here. Imagine you have age, and you say input, please enter an age. Enter your age. And let's say we want to print age plus 10. This is going to throw us an error. And let me explain why that's happening. So let's say I say 50. You find that there's an error here. Why am I getting an error here? It's because when you take in an input from the user, it comes in a string format, but the math can only work if it's an integer or if it's a float. So the question is, what do we need to do to convert this string into an integer? So the way that we do it is we just say int, open parentheses, and then close parentheses. Now, if I run this, it's going to be fine. 20, and it says it adds 30, it adds 10, and then it gives you the output 30 here. Imagine I want to make it look slightly nicer. Here's here. Apologize here. Cool. So the key point I want to emphasize here is that whenever you take in data from the user, it's going to be in string format, and you need to cast it as an integer or as a float to be able to do the math on it. Now, there's some basic mathematical operations that we can do, and let me just quickly show you how that works. So let me show you how do you add, subtract, multiply, divide numbers. So just for our example here, let's just have two variables. Let's say we have a variable called a, which is equal to 10, and a variable called b, which is equal to 8, right? Suppose we want to say a plus b. That's pretty much standard addition, nothing fancy going on here. Suppose we want to subtract a minus b, get the value of 2, right? And suppose we want to multiply both these numbers together. We go a multiply b. And let's say we want to divide it. Now, this is going to be interesting. Just watch very carefully what happens here. Okay. What happens is that even though both these numbers are integers, Python is smart enough to convert it into a float. That's the reason why you get 1.25 here. So that's just a standard division. The next operator I'm going to show is something that probably you haven't seen before. It's called a modulus or a remainder. So this is how it works. So imagine I want to know what's the remainder when I divide a by b. So what I do is I go a, and then I put the percentage sign by 8, sorry, by b, and the answer I should get is 2, because 2 is going to be the remainder, and I get 2 here. And what you can also do is that you can raise the variables by a certain number. So imagine I want to raise a to the power of b. So what's happening is that this is saying a to the power of b. That's what's happening here. It's going to be a really large number. There we go. So that's how you raise something by an exponent. So that's pretty much the basics of arithmetic expressions in Python. The next thing I wanted to emphasize is that just with standard algebra, the typical rules apply when it comes to order of operation. And if you have a very long string of mathematical operations, I would highly recommend that you use parentheses to figure out exactly what's going on, because otherwise it's easy to lose track of what's going on. So use parentheses just to indicate to yourself what's the order of operation. So now what we're going to do is that we're going to spend another 10 minutes. We're going to create a tip calculator. What it would do is that, let me show you. Ask for the bill amount from the user. Ask for the desired tip. Is it 15%, 20%? And then print out the final value. So that's going to be the second exercise for today. I'm going to be posting that on our YouTube link. And also I'm going to go to our programming exercises and post it. So spend 10 minutes. It's about 3:17 right now. So let's come back at about 3:25, 3:30 to go through this exercise. So spend 10 minutes or so. Let's get this tip calculator done. And if you have any questions, post it in the programming exercises channel. And when you're done with the tip calculator, just post your response on the programming exercises channel as well, because others can take a look at it and learn from it as well. All right, we have some answers coming in already. Let me take a look here. BOF was the person to submit an answer. Right. Okay. Spend about 3 minutes just to wrap up your tip calculator, and then we're going to come back and we're going to learn how to fine-tune this tip calculator. What happens if somebody enters a negative value for the bill amount, and how do you go about making sure that the system is smart enough to recognize that and it informs the user that they should enter the right amount. You're going to learn how to do that next. So spend about 3 minutes just to wrap up, and then we're going to come back and continue with if-else statements so that we can control the structure of our programs. All right, 2 more minutes. One more minute, wrap it up. We're going to come back and see what we've got here. All right, folks, let's get back. So the first person to submit the response was Boff. So let me just show you what he did here. Let's take a look at it. So I run the code. The bill amount, let's say, it's 100. My tip percentage is 20. So the system says that I have to pay 120. This is a perfectly fine answer. The one feedback that I would give is that instead of casting it as an integer, it is better to cast it as a float in this case. And the reason why I say that is it's entirely possible that the bill amount isn't a nice round number. It's perhaps $52.50 or $60.40 instead of a nice integer. So it is better to have it as a float, but maybe the tip amount, you can just have it as an integer to simplify it. So it's $90.90. So there we go. So in more intermediate advanced classes, one of the things that we would focus on is how do we format the string such that we only have 2 decimal points and so on. But once again, because this is introductory, we're not going to focus on that. But that's something that we can discuss later on after the class. So you can ask me and ask your peers exactly how you format the string such that you just have 2 decimal points. But for now, we're not going to bother about that. So the key thing is you learn how to get the data from the users, cast it in the right format, do some manipulation, and put the output out. And clearly, that has worked out here. So let's get back. Let's focus on how to control the structure of our programs. How do we have program validation? So imagine in this case, let's say that the user keyed in a negative amount. Let's say he keyed in a negative 500. Let's try it. And it says that you have to pay negative 600. Clearly, that doesn't make sense. So the program needs to be smart enough to recognize that if it's a negative amount, it's wrong, and you need to get an error message. So how do we go about doing that? So that's what we're going to learn in the next section. How do we create if-else statements? So go back to REPL. Let's learn how to do an if-else statement. So the thing with if-else statements is that it checks the input and figures out if there's an error, and if there's an error, it sends out a message to the user. So let me give you a simple example here. So tip amount input code input, please enter a tip amount. Now this is going to be the structure of an if-else statement. Just take a look at it first, and then we can do it. If tip amount is less, if it's more or equal to 0, that makes sense. Else, print tip amount is wrong. Let's just try it out, and then let me explain what's going on with this if-else statement and why I am indenting the code here. So I'm going to explain that in a very brief moment. So tip amount, oh gosh, give me a second. There's a typo here. All right, let's try it again. Let's say I key in at 90. It says it makes sense. And suppose to try minus 80. Tip amount is wrong. So the system is getting smarter. It's able to give you an output based on the variable itself. So let me explain what's the general structure of an if-else statement, and then we can try our hand at some coding problems. So this is going to be the general abstract structure of a if-else statement. So you have if, and then you enter the condition you want to check, and then you enter the code that you want to execute. Okay. Else, and then the code that you want to execute. If condition isn't. So this is the general structure of a if-else statement. So you have if, you check if the condition is true or not, and then if it's true, you execute that code. In this case, it's just printing, but eventually we'll be using functions and it'll be getting more sophisticated. But for the time being, it's just check the amount, check the condition. If it's true, you execute this bit of code, and then if it's not true, you execute this code. So that's what's going on. So with your previous, so just to make sure, this is the abstract structure of an if-else statement. Does that all make sense? Does anybody have any questions at this point before we try out an example? All right. So I have a very simple coding challenge here using if-else statements. So here's the challenge. Take in two numbers from the user, figure out which number is bigger, output the larger number, the bigger number. So this is a very simple problem. Just take else practice. Just take about 3 minutes or so. Just try your hand at this. So just to practice your if-else statements, try this out. Take in two numbers from the user individually, figure out which number is bigger, and then output the bigger number. So take about 3 minutes, try this out, and then let's get back to it. Okay, take another 2 more minutes. This is a simple exercise. And then we'll get back. Okay, 1 more minute. If you have completed the mini exercise, post your answer. Right, I see Wanna Get Rowdy finished it. Sestrin has finished it. All right, so okay, I think people are more or less done with it. Okay, I'm seeing a stream of answers coming in. Okay, so let me show you how it's done. So the first thing is we need to set up 2 variables. Let's just say the first variable is called first, input, enter first number. And remember, whatever you get as an input from the user is going to be in a string, so you need to convert it into an integer or a float. So let's just convert it into a float here because there could be a decimal point. First, and then we create another variable called second equal float input enter the second number. Okay, so we have set up 2 variables. We have gotten the input from the user. We have converted that into a float. The next thing we need to do is figure out what's the bigger number, right? So let's say if first is bigger than second, maximum, let's just say, yeah, maximum is good. Maximum equal first, and minimum equal second. Else, maximum equal second and minimum equal first. Right, and then suppose we want to print the statement saying that, hey, the bigger number is maximum. I mean, this. Yeah. Okay. Let's roll that right now. Okay, let's say the first number is 3. Second number is 90. Oops. My bad. Okay. So the reason why I got an error here is that maximum is a float, but you can only print out a string. So what I should do is put an str here and then try it again. Try it. Okay. 20. 90. So now it says that the bigger number is 90. So I want to just explain the flow of code here. This is pretty critical to understand, and the indentation can be a bit confusing for beginners. So what's happening is, first of all, we're checking if this condition is true. So in this case, it says first number equal 20, second number equal 90. So first number is obviously not bigger than the second number. So this condition is false. So if it's false, it skips line 13 and 14 and goes straight to this else section. And then this is the code that gets executed. So maximum gets assigned to the second, minimum gets assigned to the first, and then we get the final output. So you need to understand how the flow of code here. That's extremely critical. So imagine you have multiple else statements. It's going to get pretty complicated for you to keep on writing else and if and else and if. The way to get around that is the else if statement in Python. So let me just show you an example and then explain what's going on here. Let's just edit this. Let's just say it's this. So imagine you're getting you're keying in a grade. Let's say it's 90 or 95 or 89, and you want to figure out what's the alphabetical grade that the student has gotten. You can't just keep on adding else statements. So else if statements are the way to get around it. Let me show you how it works. So first of all, let's say we key in number equal input. Please enter exam score. Okay. And let's say we say that, okay, if number is greater than 93, letter grade equal 8. Else if, elif, number greater than 79, let's say 80, right? Letter grade equal B, elif, number greater than 70, letter equal C. Simplify it. I'm just going to stop here and just put else letter equal F. Let's just say print letter grade is quiet. Okay, let's say 98. Oops, my bad. I need to convert this into a integer, right? There we go. So I want to explain what's happening here. So when you have a list of else if statements strung together, let's explain the flow of code here. So imagine a key in the 90 as the exam score. So it sequentially checks these conditions. So the program asks, so is the number greater than 93? False. Okay, let's move to the next statement. Is the number greater than 80? Yes. Letter grade equal B, and it just terminates the flow of the program. That's it. But imagine a key in the number 60, right? Let's just say a key in 60. What happens? The program asks, is the number greater than 93? No. Is the number greater than 80? Nope. Is the number greater than 70? Nope. And this is the final catch-all statement, and it says, okay, the letter grade is going to be equal to F. So that's how it works. So it sequentially checks against the condition, and then it assigns the variable, and then it just exits the whole code that we have here. So that's how else if statement works. This can be a little confusing, so I just want to pause here for a second and figure out and ask if we all have any questions about this. Is everyone okay? Any questions? Yeah, Karen Jr. Yeah, that's a steep grading curve. Yeah. Okay, I think, is everyone okay with this, with else if statements? All good with. Okay, awesome. So let's get to the, yep, okay, great. I just want to get some feedback on if it's all good. Good. Okay, great. So the next thing I wanted to show was how do you, so right now we just have one condition, right? If the number grade is above 93, you give them the letter grade A. But suppose you have multiple conditions. How do you put them together? And that's where and the or operators come together. So let me type it up. So this is a topic called logical operators, and we're going to see how that works here. And then after that, we're going to do a sort of a mini challenge, but it's going to be challenging. Let's work on that later. So let me just show you how these compound Boolean operators work. So remember, when it comes to data types, we talked about strings, we talked about integers, we talked about floats. There's actually another data type called Booleans, and it gives you the two values to it. It's either true or false. Either true or false. And the thing is, with and or, you can put together multiple conditions to check if you meet certain conditions or not. So imagine it's that same exercise where you key in a grade from 0 to 100, and you want to give feedback on the code when it's wrong. So imagine I say number equal input, enter a number, enter the grade, enter the exam score. Okay, and clearly the number has to be above 0, and it needs to be below 100. So we want to say, look, if both these conditions aren't met, we want to show them an error message. So if number is greater than 100, or if the number is below 0, I'm going to say print grade must be between 100 and 0. Else, no. And then you can still go on and say else fine. Fine, and then maybe we'll have some code here to execute later on. So suppose I try this out. Say I say 900. Oops. Once again, you got to cast it as an integer. Okay. Run it again. Imagine I say 900. I accidentally added a 0. The system is smart enough to tell me the grade must be between 0 and 100. My bad here. Okay. Suppose we enter the right value. Say 90. So the number is fine, and then eventually we'll have code here that executes. So this is OR. So the thing with the OR operator is that just one of these sites need to be correct. But actually, if we want to make it absolutely accurate, you want to put an AND so that both sides of the operator are correct. So let's try that again. Let's see. Oh, no, sorry. So this is supposed to be OR. My bad. Okay. Okay, let's try this again. Cool. So this is called a compound Boolean expression. So you can have OR, you can have AND. So essentially you're checking the conditions. So with or, just one of these conditions has to be true. With and, if you use it, both of these conditions have to be true. So now we're going to do another exercise. Let me show you the challenge here. So the idea is we want to check. So there are two parts to this exercise. Focus on just the first part of the exercise. So you want to get the user to submit a password, and then you want the user to submit you want to give them a message saying that, look, hey, if the password doesn't contain at least 8 characters, or if it doesn't contain a numeral, then it's wrong. It's an invalid password. So that's the first part of the exercise. There's a second part of the exercise that we're going to work on later, but just work on the first part. And this is a little tricky because we haven't covered how to check the length of statements and checking methods on string, but I'm going to share with you the link, and I want you to put it together. So spend about 10 to 15 minutes on this challenge. This is a bit more complicated. Work on it, and then we can come and discuss. Let me share that link with you all in a very brief moment. Here we go. I'm going to share it with you all. But this is a little bit more challenging because you need to learn how to find the length function and has a numeral function. But I'm going to share those links with you all, both in the YouTube channel as well as the Discord channel. This is a bit more challenging. Spend about 15 minutes to work on it. So there are two things that you need to pick up on your own. How do you find the length of these strings? And how do you check if a string has a numeral or not? So I'm going to let you all figure that out for about 10 minutes or so. And if you can't still figure it out, I'll share those links with you all. So the idea is that the password needs to be at least 8 characters or longer, and it should contain a numeral. It should contain a number inside it. So spend about 15 minutes. So the time right now is about 3:53. Let's reconvene at about 4:10. And then we'll go through while loops and for loops, and then we can build something more sophisticated on top of this password verification tool. So spend 15 minutes, work on this. If you have any questions, post them on the Programming Exercises channel. Yeah, direct, that's it. It's length, correct. This is a little bit more challenging than the ones that we have done, but keep persevering and you'll get it. So there are two conditions with the password. It needs to be at least 8 characters long, and it needs to contain a numeral. And if you're done, submit your answer on the Programming Exercises channel. So just to clarify, it needs to have a number inside it, and it needs to be at least 8 characters long for it to be a valid password. So if it's valid, you tell the user that it's a valid password. If it isn't, you tell the user that it's an invalid password. Right. Has anybody figured out how to check if there are any numbers within the string itself? Has anyone figured out that? Right. So here's a hint. Think about string methods. Right. I see that Kim Jong. Okay, if you have any errors, if you're getting mistakes, post it on the channel, and then I can take a look at it. We can. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. You're all asking the right questions. You know, can we use is alpha, is digit? Yep. Test it out. Go ahead, test it out. And then I'll give you some extra clues along the way. All right, so I see Naga C. So Naga C has the right answer. So you don't need to use while statements, for statements yet. Just use if else, and here's the clue. Think about length of the function, len, and then you can use is digit. So is, okay, I'm going to explain that later. I wanted you all to figure it out, but yes, length and is digit. These are the things you want to use. Okay, take about another, say, 8 minutes or so for those who haven't done it. So this is a bit of a stretch exercise, but yeah, but those are the clues. Think about length. Google length. How do you get the length of a string? And then how do you check if a string has a digit? So Google that if you haven't figured that out yet. All right, so the answers are streaming in. That's good. Let me take a look at this. So is alpha is another string method. Yeah. Okay, I see that most people are almost done, it seems. Is alpha. Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, let's just wrap up this exercise in about 5 minutes so that we have enough time to go through for loops and while loops. This, I admit, was a bit of a stretch exercise. I wanted to stretch you out. I thought we should get the energy pumping again, do a challenging exercise. If you can't figure out how to check if the password has an integer or not, just try to focus on verifying that the length of the password is at least 8 or more characters. Just focus on that first. Okay, just 2 more minutes. Just wrap it up, and then let's get back so that we can focus on for and while loops. One more minute, and then we can come back. Okay, so let's get back to it. So wrap up your code, get back to the live stream. Okay, let's get back, guys. So let's take a look at what Christina Lenz came up with. So let's run through the code itself very quickly, and then let's see what's going on here. Right, so it says, please input a password containing at least 8 characters and at least 1 numeral. Okay, so imagine I do it in an incorrect fashion. Let's just say I put AL, just 2 characters. System says invalid password. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, let's say I just key in 9 characters. QWERTY UP. So I have more than 8 characters, but I don't have 1 numeral. The system says invalid password. So that's great. So let's take a look at what's happening here. So she gets the string input from the user, and she assigns it to this variable called password. And then what she does is that she creates this variable called check num, and she says that if that string is alpha. Okay, so I want to explain this. Is alpha is a method that's associated with strings, and what happens is if all of the elements in the string are just letters, it becomes true. Otherwise, it's false. So this is something that you needed to Google to figure out. But so this is called a method. We're going to go through that more thoroughly later on. And what happens is so she says, look, if the length is below 8, or if this is true, meaning it's all just characters, if either of these conditions is true, you're going to get this message invalid password. Otherwise, you're going to get password is okay. Now, this isn't 100% perfect because if instead, imagine if you have exclamation points or some other punctuation, it would still think that it's not all just characters. So it's not an absolutely perfect answer, but there are more sophisticated ways of doing it that make it more accurate. You have regular expressions and so on. You could run a for loop through each element of the string to figure out if there's an integer or not. But we're not going to do that at the moment. Eventually, we'll get to that. But this is just a very basic class. So this would do for the moment. That's that. So this isn't a perfect answer, but based on what we know so far, I think this is good. And if you have any questions, you can post it once again on the programming exercises channel, or you could email me later on. But this, for our basic understanding right now, it's a good enough answer. So we have about 15 minutes left. I'm going to quickly run through for loops and while loops. So that's going to be what we're going to be covering in the remaining 15 minutes. We're going to focus on functions and other stuff and lists later on for next week. So let's get into for loops. So let me put this up. Let me create a new REPL. So suppose you need to print out a message 10 times, right? It would be silly to just say print hello world, hello world, hello world. That's going to be that's a waste of your time. So you want to create a for loop so that it's able to print out multiple lines so that you can do things over multiple times, essentially. So this would be a structure of a for loop. Let me type it out here. For I in range 10 and hello. Try it out yourself and let's see what happens. I'm going to explain what's happening later on. Just give it a shot first. So for I in range 10, print hello world, and you find that it prints it out 10 times. So give it a shot. Now, suppose we want to see what this is called a counter. So it runs within the range here. So imagine I want to say, look, print I. So let's see what's going to happen here. This is interesting. It starts with 0 and ends at 9. So that's something you need to realize here. So whatever you key in inside the range, you need to realize that it starts with 0. That's just the way Python works. And 10 is excluded. So that's something you need to realize. Now, imagine I put in 1 and 10 here. Let's see what happens then. You find that it starts with 1, but 10 is excluded. So whatever first number you key in, it starts with that number, but the digit here is excluded. So imagine you just key in 2 variables here. That's how it works. But let me show you something else. Imagine you key in 3 variables and you put 2 here. So this is the start counter, this is the end counter, and this is the number of digits that it's going to jump by. So it's going to be 1, 3, 5, and 7. Let's take a look at that. So this is just a way to jump the sequence. So this is a for loop. It allows you to execute multiple lines with just a very short piece of code. So I know that I'm speeding up a little right now. So if you have any questions, post it on the YouTube channel, comment section, post it on the Discourse programming exercise channel. I'm kind of speeding up towards the tail end right now. So any questions about for loops? Right. I know that I'm rushing towards the end. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to type out the notes so that you have something handy to refer to later on. But just 30 seconds, any questions about for loops that you want me to answer? Yeah, I haven't got into while loops. I'm going to get into that very soon. Any questions about for loop? Is everyone okay with for loops? Okay, so one of the questions, okay, you had a question about break. How do you break a control statement? That's only for a while loop. You're not going to get into that. How do we do a decrement? Nate had a question. So the way that a decrement works is that the third number, you need to put a negative. Let me see. Check. No. It's gonna run an error. So Nate had a question about how do you do a decrement? Your first number needs to be bigger, second number needs to be smaller, and then you put a negative number. This may be a little confusing because we haven't run through the idea of multiple parameters. We're going to go through that next week. So just to give you a flavor of how these for loops work. So let me just quickly scan for any questions. Okay, cool. So in the interest of time, we have about 10 minutes or so. Let me just quickly jump into while loops. Okay, let me jump into while loops here. Let's show you how while loops work. So I'm going to get the notes and maybe add some trial problems for example problems that you can try out for for loops and while loops. But let me show you how a while loop works. So this is how a while loop works. Imagine while. So imagine, let's say, value. So while true number. 1 second. Cool. Let's try this. So imagine this is how a while loop would work. So imagine I say 10, count equal 10. And I say, look, while count is above or equal to 1, print out count, and then count minus 1. So let's run through this. Let's try it out and let me explain the logic of the code here. Okay, so you have this variable called count, which is equal to 10, and then this is the structure of the while loop. It's somewhat similar to an if-else loop in the sense that it evaluates the first condition and asks, okay, is this true or not? So 10 is definitely greater or equal to 1. So it says, let's print out count, and then it adjusts the value of count, and then it keeps on running. And the moment it hits 1, it says, yes, print out count 1. It says now count is equal to 0. So this statement becomes false. And because of that, that's the end of the while loop. So this is how a while loop works. A for loop and a while loop tend to be interchangeable, but there are certain reasons why people would prefer a for loop and certain reasons why you would prefer a while loop. I would make sure that I include these exercises at the tail end so that you get a sense of when to use which. So once again, I'm breezing through a while loop very quickly. Any questions about the while loop? I'm going to go through break statements next about within while loops. So if you have any questions about while loops, put that in and I could go through that. Right. 1 more minute. Any questions about while loops? Okay, cool. Let me run you through how a break statement would work. So right now, this piece of code executes all the way until this condition isn't met. But imagine we want to, for some reason, we want to say that, look, if the count value is 5, we just want to stop. So the way that would work is if count equal 5. So the equal is it's checking the value of count to say if it's equal to 5. Then I want to say break. Break is this keyword. It'll break out of this whole while loop. So if this condition is met, it'll break out of the whole while loop. So let's take a look at it. Now what you find is at the moment it's 5, it's break and it stops. So that's how a break statement works. You want to control the flow of the while loop inside of the while loop itself. So that's the break statement. So the way that you would apply this is, imagine you're getting a list of numbers from the user, and you want to say, look, if you hit enter, which is an empty string, just break. So let me show you how that would work. So imagine we want to create a program that sums up the values from the user. So it's like a calculator, and you want to say that, look, if you enter just an empty string, you want to stop. So I'll create a value called sum. Let's make it a float. Look, while true, data equal integer. Let's make it a float. Input, enter a number, or just enter. Okay, so this is how it works. If the data is just an empty string, system says, oops. System says, oops. Let's see what's going on here. If it's just empty, we say, look, let's break out of it. Otherwise, what I want to do is I want to create this value called number, which is equal to float. Sum equal sum plus data. And then I'm going to say print total sum is our sum. Try this. Oops, we have an error here. If data equal data sub. Oh, this needs to be an equality operator, my bad. Okay, let's get 93. Let's say I just want to stop it. I just hit enter, which is an empty string. And then it says, could not convert string to a float. Okay. Let's see, line 11. Oh, okay, I shouldn't have done this here. My mistake. Okay. So the mistake I made here was that I tried to convert an empty string into a float. That doesn't work. So I should have casted the data as a float here instead. Let's try this again. So if we're doing this, try this along with me just to get some practice here. 30, 30. Let's say I stop. You find that it adds up all the values and you get the total number at the tail end. So right now what you're seeing is that we included this break statement so that we know when to stop this loop. So it allows us to control the flow of the loop itself. So any questions about this right now? So one more minute. Any questions about the while loop, the break statement? Post it on the YouTube channel. Post it on the programming exercises channel. One more minute. Any questions about while loop, break? Okay, great. It's making sense. Okay, I'm whizzing past these sections because we're kind of running out of time. So what I'm going to do is that by the end of the day, you should see a link to a Google document with notes on for loop and while loop and exercises linked with that. So you should expect that in the announcement section by 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time today. And at the same time, I'm going to be live on the channel occasionally to answer any of your questions. And specifically 8 p.m. on this Wednesday, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. I'm going to dedicate that time to be on the programming exercises channel, so that if you have any questions, you can ask me, and I can help you answer. There are other people doing it as well. That's fine, helping you answer questions. But I just want to dedicate those 2 hours to answer any questions that you have. So today, what we have done is just kind of gone through the basics of Python. We ran through data types. We learned how to write if-else statements. We have learned how to write for loops and while loops. It was a bit of a rush. I'm going to give you the notes so that you have a chance to practice those skills. And next week, we're going to focus on functions. And next week, it's going to be far more exciting because we're going to be downloading data sets and doing some basic statistics on it. We're going to be asking questions like, we're going to be taking this Disney movie data set and asking ourselves, do comedy movies have higher viewerships than action movies? What are the mega hits of Disney, and so on? So these are the questions that we're going to be focusing on next week. So next week is going to be a lot more applied than this week. But if you have any questions, feel free to post it. Programming Exercises channel is the go-to place. I hope that you like this session. And next week, we're going to be meeting at the same time on YouTube for the second class, which is more data science focus. But today was just a really crash course to the intro into Python. Thank you so much, guys. See you all next week.